again. I am Mike, and I am the Sports History Collector. Today's episode of Athletes at War is Volume 13 for World War II, featuring baseball's Frank BaumHoltz. Frank played in parts of 10 seasons for the Reds, Cubs, and Phillies, compiling a .290 batting average and coming in 5th for Rookie of the Year in 1947. Frank's first love was basketball, and he was very good at it for Ohio University. But realizing he could make more money at baseball, he chose to sign and play in the minor leagues for the Reds. This was 1940, and with the first peacetime draft now in place, he felt like he should go ahead and sign up to get his one-year hitch out of the way. So, in October of 1941, Frank BaumHoltz joined the Navy, not realizing that in 2 months that the world would be at war and he would not play organized baseball again until 1946. BaumHoltz was in line to make the baseball roster for the Great Lakes military team, which included many big leaguers, but with his college degree and becoming commissioned as an ensign, Frank instead received orders to report to the Armed Guard School at Naval Station Treasure Island in San Francisco. This was where BaumHoltz's path diverged from many of the ballplayers who joined the armed forces in World War II. Many of the more established players spent their time in physical education programs and staging exhibitions to boost the morale of other troops. But the combination of BaumHoltz not yet being established as a major league player and the fact that he had a college degree, which helped him gain his commission, put him on track for the kind of combat duty that many Great Lakes players never had to face. The Armed Guard was responsible for protecting merchant ships from attack by enemy planes, ships, and submarines. Armed Guard officers led naval gunnery teams of about 24 that worked in concert with the civilian seamen they were assigned to protect. A kind of doctor, chaplain, and commanding officer at the same time, as Navy history puts it. Aside from a short break that allowed him time to rush home to Cleveland to marry his fiancée, Betty Bell, Ensign BaumHoltz spent much of the period from late 1942 through the spring of 44 on ships making convoy runs across the Atlantic. Hazardous duty considering all of the Nazi U-boats that were in the Atlantic. In January 1944, BaumHoltz was sent to the Submarine Chaser Training Center in Miami, Florida, and then trained with the amphibious forces. Now a lieutenant, he was put in charge of the USS LCI 633, a sea-going amphibious assault ship, which served in the Pacific Theater, providing support for the landings at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The 633 took a hit from Japanese artillery at Iwo Jima, causing damage to the stern but no casualties. It was also just 1,500 yards from the USS Birmingham when a kamikaze hit the cruiser on May 4, 1945, killing 47 crew members. In late August, with the war over, BaumHoltz was given command of LCI Group 61. He had the opportunity to take a flotilla of ships back to Japan to serve with the occupying forces, but he also had enough points accumulated to be discharged from the Navy. By this point, he just wanted to go home sweet home, so with very little contemplation, he chose to muster out with a Bronze Star and was back home in Ohio around the end of the year. Even though he was back home, the war for Frank wouldn't end for some time. People that were at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, it took me years and years to block that out of my mind. There were so many things that were happening, BaumHoltz recalled. Everything I blotted out of my mind, but I could not blot it out at night. Betty used to say to me, "Wake up!" And I'd say, "What?" And she'd say, "You're reliving the war." And I'd say, "What do you mean, reliving the war?" She'd say, "You're ordering your crew around, telling them to do this and do that. And so-and-so's here, and you've got them doing this and that. You're fighting the war in your sleep." It took a few years. Frank BaumHoltz, we thank you for your service. Just a footnote that when he got back home, instead of going directly to the minors for the Reds, he joined up with the Youngstown Bears of the National Basketball League during the winter of 1945 and 46, averaging over 10 points a game, but was back playing baseball in the spring of 47 and never looked back. Also of interest, Frank was honored as part of the inaugural class of the 1965 Ohio University Bobcats Hall of Fame, as well as the 2010 enshrinement to the Ohio Basketball Hall of Fame. Here on display we have from my collection a 1952 Bowman signed Frank BaumHoltz card. I especially like this card. The colors, as with a lot of the cards I've shown, the colors are very, very nice. They're deep and rich. Blue of the hat and the sleeves, the gray of the uniform. But what really gets me with this card is the skin tones seem to be perfect. The shading, the different shades of the skin tone just are perfect. It really draws your eye. And of course, the signed signature of Frank BaumHoltz is perfectly placed across the side and sleeve in blue ballpoint pen. Really stands out. Another thing I like about this card is the uniform itself. Not like today's uniforms that are a little more tailored per se. This really captures that time in baseball history where you see the sleeve is very baggy. These were like wool uniforms that weighed a ton when they got when the players sweated, especially out in day games, and with all this extra uniform they had, it could get quite heavy. But anyway, I do like this card quite a bit. Anyway, that is Athletes at War, Volume 13, Frank BaumHoltz. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you soon.
My heart's like an